say what is up to you guys and thank you for your support. Happy holidays to all of you guys. But let's get right into Clarence Thomas. So, Clarence Thomas is the Black Supreme Court Justice that's been on the court for decades. I want to have a conversation about him, but I'll need you guys to understand what just broke. And what just broke is a possible compromising the government at the highest level. Clarence Thomas threatened to quit the SCOTUS, Supreme Court, unless he could get rich. So Republican politicians arranged for billionaires to start inundating him with money and gifts in exchange for continued service. So there's three branches. There's the executive, the legislative, and then there's the judicial branch. What has happened as a result of the polarization of politics, right and left, is that the judicial branch has become extremely strong. And for a long time, it was 5-4 split, which meant that there was a swing vote. What I need you guys to understand is what he was actually negotiating. This man that sits before you was negotiating everything about your politics for his own wealth. So the face as ADOS blacks of conspiracy, of not being good enough, we already have the Claudine Gay Harvard stuff with the plagiarism. When do we look at the reality of the consequence of not having wealth, not being a production class, not actually having elevated to the heights of these positions? So as a result, we're beholden to the whites, at least those of us that become these positions, and compromise.
All right, Shalom. This is the brother Nahalia from the GMS Orlando camp. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakudash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yashar Allah, and a sincere salutation to all Yuakim, who are preaching this word and believing this word, and to the Akwath, who are believing this word, in all truth and in sincerity. Yahweh is the name of the one they ignorantly call God. Yahweh Shai is the name of the one they ignorantly call Jesus. Bahashem is in the name, Rakah is spirit, Kodash is holy, Akyam is brothers, Akwath is sisters, Shalom means peace, and Yashar Allah is Israel in ancient Paleo-Hebrew. Now, I want to go into a lesson based on the clip you just saw. This is the actual article. And I want to cover a couple points through the spirit, as we enter into, the hopeful year of Jacob's trouble. A lot of things are unfolding, as we get closer to the election of this year. And what we're finding out through the spirit is what the Lord had already told us. All right, so let's start here, because there's a couple points that Tone Talks made in that clip. And I just want to touch one of the points before I move forward. This is Deuteronomy chapter 28. And I'm going to jump up to verse 48. And it reads, "Therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which the Lord shall send against thee, in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and in want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he have destroyed thee." All right. So we have to go to our enemies. All right. For the want of all things. All right. Want meaning the lack of things. All right. Matter of fact, let's read in the NLT. It says, "You will serve your enemies whom the Lord will send against you. You will be left hungry, thirsty, naked, and lacking in everything. The Lord will put an iron of yoke on your neck, oppressing you harshly until he has destroyed you." And Esau, Edom, all right, the so-called white man, was the tool in which the Lord was able to basically subdue and punish us for our iniquities. Now, I want to go into a lesson based on what Tone Talks mentioned concerning the Supreme Court Justice, who is a Jake, or he appears to be a Jake, as a caveat, Clarence Thomas. All right, now he's come up in the news because, again, he has allegedly, received certain, it's basically bribes in another way. All right, whether it's gifts or whatever the case may be, which suggests that his position is compromised. Now, he is basically a conservative Republican advocate in the so-called black community. All right. And this shows you, all right, as the scriptures tell us, not to take bribes. All right. Because, again, it destroys judgment. All right. There's Ecclesiastes chapter 7:7. "Surely oppression maketh a wise man mad, and a gift destroyeth the heart." All right, verse 7 in the NLT reads, extortion turns wise people into fools, and bribes corrupt the heart. So Clarence Thomas is an example of what bribes do to the mind of a Negro, Latino, or Native American when they accept bribes. All right, this is why the scriptures talk about not following a multitude to do evil, not taking gifts. All right, because when you see in the scriptures where it talks about taking gifts, it's not talking about a goodwill gift. It's talking about bribes. All right, let's get the law real quick. Here it is. So it's Deuteronomy chapter 16 and verse 19. And it reads, thou shalt not wrest judgment. Thou shalt not respect persons, neither take a gift, for a gift doth blind the eyes of the wise and pervert the words of the righteous. Now, this lesson, I want to touch 2 points in particular. One of those points is that ultimately, we haven't been brought here to be brought on the same level as the so-called white man and the other nations. We were brought here as a punishment, as a nation of people, as a collective. And this is why we find ourselves in this position. All right. Now, another point I want to show is that even with Jake's mentality of trying to climb up the ladder, they don't really realize how far gone we actually are as a nation of people when you actually look at the numbers. All right. But it really goes back to the curses. The Lord said we will be the tail and not the head. All right. We will be the borrower and not the lender, which means there will be a wealth gap or a wealth disparity that won't allow you to sit on the same footing as other nations of people, even if you have the same job. Because one of the misconceptions our people have is that if you become a doctor or a lawyer, now you're automatically rich, and that's not the case. And there's an article that I want to touch after this one to highlight that. So dealing with bribes and corruption. All right, let's deal with the recent article that was released by ProPublica. All right, and it says a delicate matter. Clarence Thomas' private complaints about money sparked fears he would resign. All right, it says in early January 2000, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas was at a 5-star beach resort in Sea Island, Georgia, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. After almost a decade on the court, Thomas had grown frustrated with his financial situation, according to friends. He had recently started raising his young grandnephew, and Thomas's wife was soliciting advice on how to handle the new expenses. The month before, the justice had borrowed $267,000 from a friend to buy a high-end RV. At the resort, Thomas gave a speech at an off-the-record conservative conference. Now, I want to say this real quick because some may not be aware of the problem with this situation. All right. And the problem is that this guy is on the Supreme Court. Not only is he on the Supreme Court as an Israelite. All right. When I say Israelite, I mean a so-called Negro, as we are labeled in this society. He's a Republican so-called Negro. So there's already this Candace Owens is an example of this as well. You have these Negroes who have basically sold themselves to the Republican Party to push a narrative. Now, this is particularly troublesome when you deal with Clarence Thomas because he's literally in the Supreme Court. All right, when you deal with the abortion situation, he was one of the contributing factors of the abortion thing. All right. Now, again, we know that abortion is unlawful. But what I'm highlighting through the spirit is that his vote is basically paid for. And this is what they're highlighting in so many ways. They're highlighting that basically he's not necessarily voting out of his own mind, but he's been influenced by the gifts. And this is why the Lord told us not to take gifts, not to take bribes, because it corrupts the heart. It closes the mouth of the wise. All right, now let's continue. It says, at the resort, Thomas gave a speech at an off-the-record conservative conference. He found himself seated next to a Republican member of Congress on the flight home. The two men talked, and the lawmaker left the conversation worried that Thomas might resign. Now, this was a problem because when Thomas would have resigned, it would have been basically a Democratic, not a Democratic, but a liberal, basically a Democratic leaning Supreme Court. So basically, if he was to actually resign because of his money troubles back then, it would have messed up the Republican influence. So they're painting a picture, they're setting it up, but we know according to the law where this all leads, because the Lord said that a gift would destroy the heart. All right, continuing, it says this: Congress should give Supreme Court justices a pay raise, Thomas told him. If lawmakers didn't act, one or more justices would leave soon, maybe in the next year. So he is making this statement to a member of Congress, which shows you that behind closed doors, these guys are all in cahoots. All right. They're all in cahoots. And whenever they run into financial issues, what do you think they do? You think they make wise judgments, or do they think about themselves and throw away everything else? And that's exactly what you have when you deal with those who have taken bribes and corrupted themselves with these gifts. And that's what politics in America is in a nutshell. It's a big pool of bribes. They may have a different word for it, campaign funding, or, but it's donations. But really, it's all bribes, because they use this lobbying. All of it is used to influence the judgment of these people that are in authority. All right, now continuing, it says this: Thomas's efforts were described in records from the time obtained by ProPublica, including a confidential memo to Chief Justice William Rehnquist from a top judiciary official seeking guidance on what he termed a delicate matter. The documents, as well as interviews, offer insight into how Thomas was talking about his finances in a crucial period in his tenure, just as he was developing his relationship with a set of wealthy benefactors. So this is highlighting, all right, this is highlighting something very important. As a matter of fact, I missed a paragraph. I want to touch this. It says, at the time, Thomas's salary was $173,600, equivalent to over $300,000 today. But he was one of the least wealthy members of the court. And on multiple occasions in that period, he pushed for ways to make more money. In other private conversations, Thomas repeatedly talked about removing a ban on justices giving paid speeches. Now, this is highlighting something important, right? Because even though he on paper made $173,600 during that time, which is equivalent to $300,000 today, he was one of the least wealthy among his peers or his coworkers. Now, why is that? All right, because this is going to highlight why Jake is so easily persuaded with bribes. Because even on these high levels, Jake is still broke compared to the other Edomites that occupy those spaces. No matter what tax bracket you go to, Jake got a certain job. There's an Edomite that's better off than him in the same job. And why is that? I want to get this article. All right. I want to get this article, and I'll just get the title real quick. This is from alumni.duke.edu. All right, you can see the title. Duke professor's research examines the racial wealth gap. Now, I want to deal with a particular paragraph, all right, that highlights why Jake is so easily persuaded with bribes. All right, and I'm going to just highlight it real quick and read it. It says, there's a disconnect between employment and accumulation of wealth, Darity says. The primary factor that determines how wealthy a household will be is their capacity to obtain resources from previous generations. It's not primarily a result of you having a job and generating income. And see, Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans don't know that. And that's why our people don't understand the situation that we're actually in as a nation of people. They don't really comprehend what's going on around us. Now, Clarence Thomas is a symptom of a disease that we have as a nation of people. And it's not economic, it's not military, it's a disobedience to the Heavenly Father, contrary to popular belief. The Lord gave us a standard. We agreed to that standard. We disobeyed that standard. And as a result, we are now under all of these curses. This is why our people are so easily persuaded with bribes, because as a nation of people, we're poor. So even though your son or maybe your uncle may have become a lawyer, they may make $170,000. They don't have an inheritance. They just a Jake with a good job. And Jakes with good jobs are not wealthy. This is something we're not taught as a nation of people. So our people don't really understand the situation that we find ourselves in. And this is why guys like Clarence Thomas are so compromised, because he's rubbing shoulders with Edomites that are actually well off. And this is, man, it goes back to what the Lord told us from the beginning, man. Let's get this. Let's get this, man. This is Deuteronomy chapter 32 and 29. Oh, that they were wise, that they understood this, that they would consider their latter end. Now, when you start at verse 28, it says, for they are a nation void of counsel, neither is there any understanding in them. And our people don't have understanding. They see social media and they think that we're someplace that we're not as a people. Now, this lesson, Lord willing, is touching 2 points that, A, we're not supposed to take bribes in the seat of judgment. You're not supposed to take bribes in general to wrestle judgment. And then 2, we weren't brought here to be on an equal playing field with Esau, Edom. We were brought here as a punishment, and the Lord's intention is to destroy this society and build something greater for us as a nation of people, beginning with the elect. Because all of these things that are happening to us as a nation of people is supposed to make us reach a particular conclusion. All right, it's Deuteronomy 31 and 17. Then my anger shall be kindled against them in that day, and I will forsake them, and I will hide my face from them, and they shall be devoured, and many evils and troubles shall befall them, so that they will say in that day, are not these evils come upon us, because our power is not among us. And the elect are going to reach that conclusion what Lord willing we be a part of that number. We realize that the only way we're going to get out of this situation is through Yahweh Bashim Al-Shah. That's it, man. And this should show you, plain as day, you got Jake in Supreme Court. You would think that, oh, he made it, right? On paper, he making a 6-figure salary. You think that he made it. But behind closed doors, these Edomites are having to give him gifts to keep him on the same level. They might have the same paycheck on paper, but their lifestyles are completely different, because Esau actually has generational wealth. That's not just some Jake on YouTube trying to sell you a course talking about generational wealth. These Edomites that are in these judges' seats, their family may have been 5 generations in politics. They have an actual inheritance. This is something Jake has no idea about. This is why we need the Lord to come back, man. Our people really don't understand the situation we're in as a nation of people, because they don't have a ruling class mentality. They don't have the vision to understand that this is the worst case scenario as a nation of people, and we need the Lord to come back. Let's read a little bit more. It says this: Congress never lifted the ban on speaking fees or gave the justices a major raise. But in the years that followed, as ProPublica has reported, Thomas accepted a stream of gifts from friends and acquaintances that appears to be unparalleled in the modern history of the Supreme Court. Some defrayed living expenses large and small, private school tuition, vehicle batteries, tires, other gifts from a coterie of ultra-rich men supplemented his lifestyle, such as free international vacations on the private jet and super yacht of Dallas real estate billionaire Harlan Crow. So what do you think they want in exchange for these gifts? Think about what they just said. It says, Thomas accepted a stream of gifts from friends and acquaintances that appears to be unparalleled in modern history of the Supreme Court. So basically, This Negro done took more bribes in the history of Supreme Court, basically, in so many words. Now they're basically he's trying to defend himself, when you dig deeper into it. But when you look at this at point blank, at face value, how are you receiving all these gifts and your judgment isn't tainted? It says unparalleled, meaning there's nobody else as far as Supreme Court justices that they could put in comparison to the amount of gifts he's received to supplement his lifestyle on that level. This is the highest level of politics. For our people that think we just got to get into politics, or nah, man. But Lord willing, we're going to dig into it. Because when we dig into it, then you start to find out what the Lord been telling us all along, man. Jake keep trying to run around the situation and try to find another way out. There is no other way out, man. To be rich in America, to have actual generational wealth, you have to have wealth over generations. And those Edomites that are lawyers, that are judges, that are in the politics, they come from money. The doctors, how do you think they're getting through school? Even if they did have a scholarship, they're coming from money. Most of these Edomites that are in professional positions in Babylon the Great, which is America, they come from money. They come from an inheritance, or they at least come from a situation where their parents can cover their car note and their tuition or their living expenses while they're in school, so they don't come out of school in debt. Jake has no idea where we are as a nation of people compared to everybody else on the playing field. But this is what the Lord told us would happen. And instead of our people acknowledging the truth, they go to these hirelings who exploit their hope. All right, there's Jeremiah 50:6. My people have been lost sheep. Their shepherds have caused them to go astray. They have turned them away on the mountains. They have gone from mountain to hill. They have forgotten their resting place. All that found them have devoured them, and their adversaries said, we offend not, because they have sinned against the Lord, the habitation of justice, even the Lord, the hope of their fathers. So this is a worst case scenario, man. As a nation of people, when you look at not just the wealth gap, but the fact that no matter where you go in society, Jake is basically being put in a position to be compromised when you deal with high level of society, whether it's music, athletics, obviously politics when you deal with this guy, Clarence Thomas. Because again, going back to the curse, you have to go to your enemies for the one of all things. And this shows you there is no carnal solution to our problem. While our people are so optimistic about their the future in this society, the ones who actually have the money, the so-called white man, they're pessimistic about what's coming down the pipeline. Matter of fact, I showed it before, but let's deal with it. All right, I've showed it before, but let's deal with it. And I'll close it with this. Let me see. Yep, this is it. Lord willing. All right, here it is. The Wadi by Shemal Shah. So this is Brookings.edu. All right, now just get the title. It says, why are black poor Americans more optimistic than white ones? And why is that? Because Jake is really, to be frank, our people are delusional. They don't look at these numbers at all, man. They don't look at none of these numbers. They rely on people that exploit their hope. A lot of our people get their news, especially the older generation. A lot of them get their news from, if it ain't social media, it's the church. Two platforms that are built to exploit your hope. And because they don't look at these numbers, they have no idea where we are as a nation of people and why we need the Lord to come back ASAP, man. I'll just read this first paragraph. America has seen a dramatic increase in the number of so-called deaths of despair caused by opioid addiction, alcohol or drug overdose, and suicide. These deaths have hit middle-aged white people without a college education particularly hard. The trend is extensive enough to have driven up the overall mortality rate, with the U.S. in the unusual position of being a rich country where life expectancy is falling rather than going up. It says, amid all this is perhaps an unexpected reality. The people who are most optimistic about their future are the most disadvantaged, poor Black Americans. And why? Because our people are being exploited, man. Think about where most Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans get their information from, man. They're not digging in articles. Most of them don't even watch the news. They're optimistic based on terrible information, if you even want to call it information. And this is why this is going to catch Jake off guard, man. It's going to catch them as a thief in the night. They heard these words, but they won't receive them. So I just wanted to touch this subject through the Spirit because it highlights two very important points. That, again, Jake that get in these positions, most of the time, if not all the time, they're compromised. And on the second end of that, Jake don't really realize that we're in the worst case scenario. And that's why guys like that get in those high positions and they take these bribes, is because they're playing in a game that they're not equipped for. All right, so Lord willing, this was edifying. With that, I'm going to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yasher Allah, and a sincere salutation to all Yuakim, who are preaching this word and believing this word, and to the Akwath, who are believing this word in all truth and in sincerity. Shalom.